Before we get to installing these brakes back on here, I wanted to take a moment to point out some pointers for the Fox body guys doing disc brake conversions. First of all, your axle housing is exactly the same as the SN95 cars, at least all the way up to 98. I believe 99 they did get a little bit longer because of the body style change, but they're the same. What changes when you go to disc brakes is obviously this bracket right here, and your axles themselves become, I believe it's 3/4 inch longer on each side, at least up until 97. So that's what's offsetting the wheels out a little further, is a slightly longer axle. The housing is identical. Now, if you want to keep the Fox body length axles in there, you can buy aftermarket brackets, this bracket right here, and it has a bend in it that moves back and sits over there, and the whole idea is that it recesses the caliper and mounts it further back in because the rotor will be sitting further in on a shorter stock Fox body axle. And I also wanted to point out a note with the differences here between the GT and the Cobra setup. There's a few pointers to note. First of all, your calipers are actually identical. GT and Cobra calipers are no different. This bracket right here is different though. This particular one is a Cobra one. The GT one would set the caliper in slightly closer to the center line of the axle. The Cobra one sits it further out because it uses 11.6 inch diameter rotors instead of 10.5 inch rotors. So obviously if you're using a smaller diameter rotor, this bracket is going to set the caliper in slightly smaller to line up with the circumference of the disc. The other difference is the caliper bracket itself, as we have noticed in this video. So this opening right here is wider for the Cobras because of the larger thickness on the vented disc. So bear that in mind when you're doing a disc brake conversion. You have to take into account this bracket right here as well as that caliper bracket over there when deciding on GT or Cobra setup. The other thing to take note is the brake lines. We'll get a better shot of this later once this caliper is installed and it's out of the way, but the hard lines themselves need to be cut down shorter and reflared with the right threads and connected into the SN95 style hose to go to your caliper instead of the drum brake setup. I personally find it easier to just put a whole new line on here from the center T-piece at the center of the differential. You're cutting and flaring anyway. Most of the old Fox body ones are pretty junk, and instead of trying to struggle under the car here, I just make a new line on the workbench and just drop it in and screw it in on both ends. Hey guys, welcome back. Part 2 of the 03 Cobra brake conversion on the 92 Fox. We're wrapping up the rear calipers in this episode. We're going to get them painted, prepped, and ready to go back on the car. After some wire wheeling, these actually look pretty good. We got most of the bulk of everything knocked off of them. Already looking way better. At this point, you can see it creates a lot of shiny spots from the wire wheel. So something to bear in mind, with the wire wheeling, it tends to polish out the metal, and you're going to get a hard time having paint stick everywhere because of that. So at this point, I'm going to hit it with some probably 220 sandpaper, scuff the surfaces up, prep them for paint, and we'll degrease and tape off and go from there. Now I'm going to hit these with a 220 sandpaper and give them a wet sand. They were so caked and corroded previously, that's why I wire wheeled them first. In hindsight, it probably could have been media blasted, they were so bad. But we're almost there now, so we'll get them sanded and going. I do want to address the issue of having those frozen pins in there. So I've gone ahead and put together, it's just a drill bit with some sandpaper taped on here with electrical tape. And the idea is we're going to run these down these holes, back and forth, and just knock out any little bit of corrosion or scaling dirt that might remain in there. We'll turn it real slow up and down. The idea is not to bore out the hole to change the size. We just want to touch them up basically so that we've got a good clean surface when we put some caliper grease and the new pins in there. Make sure they're going to work properly. Alright, we'll go ahead and touch these up with some solvent and compressed air, and then I'll look them over real good with a bright light and a magnifying glass and make sure it looks just spot on. Time to tape up the calipers. All the little spots you don't want paint. This becomes quite tedious and took quite a lot of time. The front calipers and brackets actually took me hours. Alright, there we go. Essentially what we have is all of the machined surfaces taped off. That would be where the brake pads ride in and out and where the rotor runs through. And I know the rotor doesn't contact it, but they always machine that on these brackets. And it always has a machined, clean, finished surface, and they often look worn too. I don't know if it's just from brake dust as it runs, or how it gets that way, but I generally don't paint in there because it just becomes scuffed and torn up and doesn't look real good. I have 2 mounting points, and of course where the 2 pins are going to go in. So after that we can get this one taped up, touch it up with some acetone, final degreasing, and then we can hang and paint. We're about ready to paint. We've got the calipers hung, ready to go. We're in the T-Top Fox Bodies garage workspace area. Works out great because it's got an exit door and an entrance door, so we can set up the extraction fans on one side, filtration on the other side, and just draft air right through. Works out great for painting. We're going to use today BHT high temp primer, so we get good adhesion to the metal. Then we're going to switch to the Duplicolor red caliper paint, and then 3 coats of the gloss enamel. About 10-minute flash time between each coat. 2 to 3 coats a piece, just depending how thick they go on and how well it looks. If you're wondering why I'm switching up here, VHT, Duplicolor, mixing here, it's because I started all out with VHT when I first started this project. The problem was that the red on these Fox bodies that I have are such a deep red. The VHT red was looking real orange, at least the cans I had. And I tried out this Duplicolor and it looked a lot, I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it looks a lot better. It's a lot more red. So I kind of stuck with it, and that's where I'm at. So, alright, let's get these fans on, and let's get this process going. Well, these came out pretty nice. Let's get them untaped and see how it came out. This is the best part of painting. Get to see the final product. Here's the finished product. We have surfaces where it bolts, where our pins are going to go in, and of course sort of that machine surface where the rotor would run through. And that's just how I like to prep and do my rotor brackets. I feel like it has an OEM feel and look to it. Oh, I missed that spot right there. I got it peeled off here. That's where the pads themselves ride in, and they would move back and forth over here, springs. So yeah, we'll get this other one uncovered, finish this one here. We've got new pins here with brand new seals and some caliper grease. This should keep that corrosion problem from ever happening again. And honestly, these should now provide many years of trouble-free service, I hope. I don't see why it wouldn't. Oh, perfect. Look at that. Perfect. I quite like the way this restore came out. I think these are going to serve us just perfect and last many years. Awesome. Get the other one wrapped up and let's get these on the car. I just have a couple lug nuts to spin down and hold the rotor in place. Makes it a lot easier when lining up the bracket and getting the caliper on. Got my caliper bracket preloaded with the pads in there, ready to go. And that fits fantastic. Works great when you match the Cobra caliper bracket with the rotor and the correct brackets. You get a little dab of caliper grease in there before I install that. Just keeps noise down usually with vibration, or harmonics rather, and no squeaking, and of course parts move better with just a film lubrication there. Alright, that's a little bit too tight. When that happens, you got to turn this right in here with a tool. You can't just press this in with a C-clamp. It's got like a thread, so it's a tool with 2 pins that goes in there. We're going to turn that, crank it in, and it'll give us the extra clearance we need. This is essentially what the tool looks like. This is actually a smaller version. These are too small. They don't quite fit. They're not wide enough for that. I have another one somewhere with slightly larger spaced pins. I can't find it right now, so that's not very helpful. I found an old throwout bearing retainer I had laying around, welded a piece of handle onto it, a couple little tips of or stubs of nail at the correct diameter, and this should do the trick for me. Perfect. In case you're wanting to build one, this was a T56 throwout bearing retainer. Just kidding. No, it really was, but just kidding about building one. Still just needs to go a bit more. I'll keep working on this. So even after turning this all the way down, I still had trouble getting it over here, so I quickly measured the pads, and sure enough they were GT pads. The Cobra pads are a little bit thinner because the rotor is thicker. So I went ahead and grabbed some Cobra pads, real Cobra pads this time. And there we go, now it slips over. Here we have it, both 3 Cobra brakes on the Fox body. Obviously this will clear out with a sharp edge. I painted these, of course, so it would look nice and not rusted. Actually, black wheels are going to be going on here, so it will blend in real nice. Once you run the pads, of course, it'll clean off the paint there, make a sharp edge. It'll look nice and clean. The last major thing to address here is going to be the parking brakes. The parking brake cable setup, I've already completely removed it off the car, so it's all clean here. I'm going to address that in another video. That's a whole topic in itself. Getting the parking brake cables to work here with the disc brakes and with the Fox body setup, the handle, and under the car, it's a whole project in itself. I'll go over that and we'll get that sorted out with what options you have and the best ways to get that taken care of.